So I've got my video on now. Can you hear me?
Yes, Prof.
Okay, I think it's better, Prof. I think it's better.
Okay, that's good.
Yes, yes.
I can hear you.
Can
Yes.
I try to share PowerPoint first?
Okay, please, Prof.
Okay, so my PowerPoint on there.
Yes, Prof. I can hear your voice clearly and as well as your slides.
Okay, that's good. So how is it now? Is it all right?
It's better right now.
Can you hear me? And can
Yes, Prof. Clearly.
right. So can we start all over again, please, Dr. Akmal?
Yes, Prof. You may start right now.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Nur Akmal. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Thank you very much all for your patience. Some technical issues cropped up. I did what am I supposed to do, and still the system failed me until what, almost 20 minutes. So my apologies. To be honest, this is the first time I'm presenting using WebEx. Prior to this, I've been an attendance participant. I didn't present using WebEx. I initially thought they were going to use Google Meet. So I prepared myself with Google Meet. Only I was told at the very end, because of our subscription or something, so we have got to use WebEx. So here we are. In fact, yesterday I have already tried with a few colleagues to make sure that the system works well, but unfortunately, that's what happened. Anyway, that is past, and we shall then move on to business in hand. Right, so the title of my presentation today is Shariah and its application in the built environment, an agenda for research. Oops, why is it coming up? Right, now my slide is stuck. What am I supposed to do? Okay, right, this is the content of my presentation, inshallah. There are 5 items here that I would like to share. First of all, many might not know what SIBE stands for. SIBE, or Sibe we call it, is one of the organizer of today's talk, together with MILBE of ACIS. So I will provide a brief introduction to SIBE at FSPU UiTM. Moving on, I will talk about Sharia, a brief introduction, followed by the concept of Sharia Compliance. Moving on, I will then explore the application of Sharia Compliance in the built environment, and finally giving ideas what can we do to research in this new subject matter. First of all, let me qualify myself, or rather disqualify myself, depending on how you look at it. I'm a quantity surveyor by training, and my area of specialization is construction procurement and innovative project delivery system. I've never been trained formally in the Sharia, but through my work, I realized the importance of Sharia, and I self-taught myself, and of course, together with experts, move on. And over the last 6-7 years, I've been very active looking into how we can apply Sharia in the built environment. And in all my works, I have to qualify myself. When it relates to the Sharia, I always have Sharia expert or experts working with me to ensure that whatever I'm doing in the context of Sharia is correct the way it should be, right? What is SIBE to start or to begin with? It is a research group that we established at FSPU, UiTM, and it was actually set up formally on the 21st of September. It is called Shariah in the Built Environment Research Group, or in short, we call it SIBE. This research group is intended to be across all disciplines. We are still admitting interested colleagues to join us to work together to make this a reality. So far, we have our members, and our members have been responsible to put things together, leading to our talk today. So what is the aim of SIBE? The aim of SIBE is to promote Sharia compliance in the built environment. And what are the objectives of SIBE? Here are some of our key objectives: to conduct research and publication in the areas of Sharia in the built environment, to promote Sharia compliance in the built environment through talks, seminars, conferences, and the like, to promote the inclusion of Sharia in teaching and learning in programs related to the built environment, and to promote the application of Sharia in the built environment. So those were the aims and objectives of SIBE. In setting up SIBE, I've been given great support, in particular from the Dean of FSPU, Prof. Jamal, and also the Dean of ASIS, Prof. Nur Hidayah. And of course, without the help of members of SIBE and MILBE, this thing will not happen. So thank you very much all. These are the core team members of SIBE and MILBE at FSPU and ASIS. The photo was taken on the 21st of September when we finally put together our working or collaborative programs. So this talk series is the first of our series of events that we have planned for, and we would like to acknowledge the contribution of colleagues in SIBE as well as colleagues from the Muamalah in Islamic Built Environment Research Group of ASIS. Thank you all. A little bit of a promotion here so that you stay tuned to what's going to happen next. So we have already organized a series of talks to put together the concept of Sharia in the built environment. So the talk series kickstart today with me talking about Sharia and its application in the built environment. And I apologize, there's been a delay of 20 minutes due to some technical issue. So over the next 3 months, we will have 2 talks a month. Yeah. So the second talk will be Sharia and the built environment by Prof. Dr. Dani from ASIS. Our third talk will be in November, Sharia in Architecture, i.e. Building Planning and Design by Professor Datuk Dr. Asiah Abdul Rahim of IIUM. Moving on, our fourth talk series will be Islamic Leadership Principle in Project Management by Dr. Muhammad Rosdi of Jabatan Parit dan Saliran. Our fifth talk will be Alam Bina Islam menurut Kitab Al-Jidal by Puan Sharifah of ASIS. Moving on, our sixth talk will be Syariah Kontrak dalam Alam Bina, Professor Madia Izani Yaakob of ASIS. Seventh talk, Suluh and Tahkim in the Built Environment by Dr. Nurul Huda Sahari of ASIS. Moving on, our eighth talk will be a review on Sharia and its application on defects in housing project by Mr. Muhammad Salahuddin Shahruddin of ASIS. And we hope to cap our talk series by having a forum Sharia in the built environment sometime in February next year. We are working on the panelists as well as content of the talk. So stay tuned. In 2 weeks' time, and for every fortnight, we will be having this talk series until February 2021. Now, moving on, Sharia, a brief introduction. But before that, can I ask, Are we okay now? Can you hear me?
Yes, Prof.
Okay.
Allah.
Okay, that's good. Minta maaf ya, tadi technical error. Right, so talking about the Sharia, of course, I am mindful that there are experts in the Sharia among the participants here today. So please, kindly, if whatever I'm saying is not correct, please guide me. As I said at the beginning, I'm not trained in the Sharia. I self-taught myself through the duties and works that I've been doing thus far. So Sharia, when we talk about Sharia, we talk about Islam. And Islam is ad-din, or way of life. The key guiding principle of the ad-din is the Sharia. So when we talk about Sharia lexicologically, it means water hole or an approach to a water hole or drinking place, but it can also be referred to as law. However, when we apply Sharia in the context of Islam, we are talking about religious obligation, i.e. complete submission to the one true God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we talk about the Al-Shari'ah, then we're talking the revealed or the canonical law of Islam or Kanun Islami. What Allah has ordained for His servant to follow with regards to the religion or ad-din. So that's briefly Sharia for the purpose of today's discussion. So its fundamental principle and values are based on the Quran and Sunnah. It can be referred to as code of moral norms, code of ethical conduct, body of divinely ordained religious law, whereby reward or punishment related to good conduct and moral behavior will be decided in the hereafter, whereas reward for transgressing the penal code, i.e. hudud, the laws of retribution, qisas, and the laws on discretionary judgment of a judge, ta'zir, are meted in Islamic courts on earth. So as Muslim, these are the sanctions that we often hear: wajib, sunnah, haram, makruh, mubah. And our main concern generally when we talk about the Sharia is those that is permissible and not permissible, or wajib and haram. Yeah? Wajib, absolute command which is compulsory and obligatory to be complied, whereas haram is action that is prohibited and unlawful. But of course, we have sunnah, makruh, as well as mubah. So when we talk about Sharia and as Muslim, these are the things that we normally follow, i.e. it is obedience or ta'ah or ta'at, we call it in Bahasa, justice or adil or adil, justly balanced moderation, wasat, constant mindfulness and consciousness of divine pleasure and displeasure, taqwa, moral spiritual purification, tazkiyah, and moral spiritual excellence or ihsan. And the objective of the Sharia or Maqasid al-Sharia is the protection of 5 basic aspects of human life, i.e. religion, life, mind, lineage, and property. That is Maqasid al-Sharia. Now, when we talk about the Sharia, there are actually 3 components of the Sharia, which is the Aqidah or faith or belief, Amal, which is practice or deeds, and Akhlaq, which is behavior. When we talk about the built environment, we are talking Sharia in the category of Amal. And in Amal, it is divided into 2, which is fiqh al-ibadah or submission or religious practices, as well as fiqh al-mu'amalat, i.e. transaction between people. So in our context, when we discuss built environment, we are talking fiqh al-mu'amalat under Amal of the Sharia. And Within the fifth muamalat, we have social, politics, economy, justice, man, and environment. But our focus will be on economy, i.e. in relation to the built environment. Of course, we cannot separate social, politics, justice, man, and environment, but the focus, when we talk about the built of environment, we are talking about the economy. So when we talk about Sharia, and in the context of al-mu'amalat, thinking about the built environment, so in Islam, Islam calls for transaction between people to be conducted in accordance with the Sharia. Within the Sharia, the principle is al-mu'amalat. Transaction that we conduct among ourselves, and in particular in relation to the built environment, is to apply the concept of justice, moral obligation, accountability, and equality. Aspects in line with Islamic belief, i.e. iman, practices, amal, and value system. Here are some of the verses from the Al-Quran talking about al-mu'amalat in relation to the built environment. But of course, we go through the Al-Quran, there are many more. But these are some of those verses that I thought relevant for my talk today. You can pick this up later on, but these are some of the verses from the Al-Quran as well as Hadith. So, moving on, after I've introduced Sharia and briefly the context that we're talking about, i.e. the built environment, now let us look at Sharia compliance, pematuhan Sharia. So, it can be referred to as transactions or activities which are performed according to the rules and standards under the Sharia. And the activity are in line with the objective of the Sharia or maqasid al-Sharia. So here we're talking about the idea, what is Sharia compliant? Apakah yang dimaksudkan dengan pematuhan Sharia? So whatever activities that we do in the context of built environment, which is my talk today, we ought to perform them in accordance to the rules and standards under the Sharia. And whatever that we are doing should be in line with the objective of the Sharia. So what are the key principles? Here are some of the key principles that have been able to gather, i.e. man as Khalifah. When we talk about development in the context of sustainability of the human civilization, we talk about the concept of al-imara, or to prosper the land. We have to do that within the context of amanah or trust. Again, Tawheed, which is Allah's unity and sovereignty. Rububiyah, the rule concerning the relationship between man and the environment. And Tazkiyah, i.e. sincerity or purification in our effort with the correct niyyah. So we talk about the built environment and things that we are doing. These are or should be among the key principles in order to enable us to practice Sharia compliance. Moving on, specifically, these are some of the elements, or rather the key elements that must be avoided. Number one, hoarding or black marketeering, al-iknas, as well as middle person or talaki al-rukban. We have to avoid monopoly or al-ihtikar. We have to avoid transaction involving prohibited subject matter, such as trading in alcohol, pork, dead animals, prostitution, and the like. We have to avoid riba, usury interest charges in loans, in which a premium must be paid by the borrower to the lender together with the principal amount. So we need to avoid this. Of course, we need to avoid gharar or uncertainty when a person undertakes a venture without sufficient knowledge and excessive risk, such as gambling. So these are some of the contexts that we need to understand within the built environment and also the principle that we need to follow or adhere to. Now, with that brief and quick 5 minutes introduction to the Sharia. Of course, I'm not doing justice to the subject matter, because if we are going to talk about the Sharia, it is really a huge, big topic in itself, and I'm sure people who are expert in this area can complement whatever little that I did today. Yeah. But in the interest of time, so to move on, after we understand what is the Sharia, what are the key principles in practicing Sharia compliant within the context of the built environment, now let us focus our attention towards the built environment. So in the context of Malaysia, when we talk about construction, according to the Department of Statistics, in 2017, the construction output recorded is at 204 billion ringgit in total. And according to KPS report, about 3% of construction output are those Islamic related facilities, i.e. mosque, surau, school, wakaf development, private development, and it amounts to approximately 6 billion a year. This is the figure in 2016. So generally, if we talk about the construction industry as a whole, we are talking at an output of about 200-300 billion, depending on the state of the economy. Yeah? And from that, about 3% or about 6 billion in 2016 are specific Islamic related facilities. The question that I'm asking, and where I consider to be the research problem, is the concept of halalan toiban in the supply chain. We talk about halalan toiban, we talk about halal haram very actively when we talk about food, for example. We talk about financing, for example. We have Islamic banking and finance. We are very particular about our food, for instance. And now people are talking halal traveling, halal visitation, halal hotel, and stuff like that. Now, let me bring your attention towards the built environment. Yeah. So when we talk about land matters for development, planning, funding for the project, moving on design, procurement, all the way until we conduct the sale and purchase between clients and the developer, and other aspect within the built environment, are we putting together what we consider to be a practice that meet the requirement of the Sharia? What we know and what we always talk about is that we make sure that the funding element is in accordance to Islamic banking system. So I round up the funding. But are we actually looking at Sharia compliant in the way we look at manpower, money, material, machine, and management? Let us think about it. Are we in anywhere near practicing what is considered to be Sharia compliant? So, when we talk about Sharia compliant in construction and the built environment, where are we? What happened to minimum standards? Do we have it? Guidelines and best practices, do we have it? Are current practices comply or not with the Sharia? I'm not suggesting that current practice are not in compliance with the Sharia, but the question remains, are they in compliance or not? So if we are talking about Sharia compliant, if we can't deal with the 200 billion worth of output a year, at least we need to be particular about the output of Islamic related facilities, the 6 billion or so annually. So the question that I ask all of us, including me, are we not concerned? And we are concerned about the food we eat. We're concerned about traveling. We're concerned about banking and finance. But what about the infrastructure that connect all these things together? Are we not concerned? So that is the key question that I would like you to pay attention. So I'm not suggesting that there is no Sharia compliant at all. I don't know. But here, based on my limited search, there is a guideline by Jabatan Perancang Bandar dan Desa on perancangan tempat ibadat Islam. Yeah, that's one. I'm sure there are a few others. And recently, I noticed in the newspaper, Pahang are very keen to construct rumah mesra syariah. And what do they mean by rumah mesra syariah di sini? So it means that there is tanda arah kiblat, privacy lelaki dan perempuan, tempat uduk mesra tetamu, but I'm not sure how, because it's only from newspaper cutting, yeah, and kejiranan mesra Islam. So therefore, there are elements of the Sharia that people are very particular and put into practice. So we test this thing while I was at the International Islamic University together with colleague, and the references at the bottom there. So we look at it and see how it goes. We tried the suraus at petrol station. We want to find out, based on design features, supporting facilities and accessories provision, are they in compliance with the Sharia? So the survey findings that we did indicate the need for minimum standard requirement for design provision of surau at petrol station. In other words, there is no standard, there is no minimum requirement. Therefore, we believe that a guideline is needed. And when we apply this understanding to other aspects of Islamic facilities and others, we find out that we need minimum standard requirements. Yeah? So this is a paper by Kerry Amani and Nabi, and they talk about the importance of Sharia in construction, yeah? Because it says that when we talk about the building, the facilities that we are going to conduct activities related to the Sharia, don't we not think that the business practice, the resourcing of planning, financing, procurement of the building should be done in such a way that it comply with the principle of the Sharia? That's what they were asking. So, in this context, yeah, I think in compliance with the Sharia is very important. And moving on, I'm going to give you an overview of Sharia compliance in contract, because there's an area that I major in. Not to worry, because other aspects of Sharia and the built environment will be taken up by the speakers as we move on into our fortnightly discussion. So we talk about Sharia compliant contract, the transaction that we deal with contractors, with consultants, you know. So what is it then? So I tried to come up with the definition in the absence of it. Okay. So a construction contract with the subject matter. Are we all right? Is there someone asking question? Okay, I'll move on. So Sharia compliant contract is a construction contract with its subject matter, agreement, terms and conditions that embrace the Islamic belief, practice and value system. Again, the key principles of Sharia compliant should be applied, i.e. business transactions are not forbidden unless there is specific nas to that effect. Sharia should facilitate. Iktinas talaki al-rukban should be avoided. Transaction must not involve riba and the likes, yeah, alcohol, gambling, prostitution, and other prohibition. We should avoid monopoly. Transaction should be conducted with patience, tolerance, and with the intention to facilitate. We uphold truthfulness, ethics, integrity, and accountability. And we need to avoid gharar and maisir, which are forbidden. Parties in the contract must fulfill their respective obligation, and they need to conduct businesses in a diligent and persevere, yeah, according to one's best ability. Now, earlier on, we talked about halalan toiban. We talked about the whole supply chain of the construction industry, either in accordance with the Sharia or otherwise. And again, as I said, I'm not accusing the current practice are not in accordance with the Sharia. It's simply that we lack data to say yes or no. But the brief study that we have done so far in the context of construction contract, for example, so in relation to the current contract practices, they lack specific provision addressing key Sharia matters that are prohibited in Islam, such as al-ihtikar, talagi rukban, riba, trading in alcohol, gambling, and the application of conventional insurance instead of takaful. Although we have to take note that in government contract, options are given to the contractor whether they want to adopt takaful or conventional insurance. But whether it is clearly prohibited or not conventional insurance, it doesn't say. And the Majlis Fatwa has already decreed that conventional insurance is haram. So what this note here suggests is that there are areas within the construction contract that appears to not in accordance with the Sharia. So when we talk about contract, yes, there is this al-istisna, which is a contract for manufacturing, because in Islam, we cannot do a transaction where the subject matter is yet to exist. But there is this principle which is called the istisna, model contract for manufacturing. But unfortunately, in the current context, the istisna has been used to facilitate funding rather than contracting between the contractor and the employer. And moving on, according to Yoshida here, for example, when he studied Islamic project finance. So according to him, based on his study and finding, Islamic finance quickly turned to mimicking the interest-based conventional finance. In fact, some label this approach as Sharia conversion technology. What does it mean here? It means here that a lot more need to be done in order to ensure that Islamic project finance meet the requirement of the Sharia. And this is according to Yoshida, and Yoshida is a banker in Japan. So, with those few information that I put together, and when I say few, because number one, constraint of time, but number two, it is really, there is very limited information on this subject area, yeah? So Sharia compliant are being applied in the built environment. So without doubt, there is element of Sharia already being practiced in the built environment. For example, the application of the al-istisna in project financing, including the use of sukuk and takaful in insurance, for example. Yeah? However, the application is very limited, and achieving halalan toiban in construction supply chain is a long way to go. Why is this so? The observation we made is that people who are involved in the built environment, the key players, lack or have very limited understanding of the subject matter. And this is exacerbated by the lack of research and publication. In other words, the key players are not very much aware of the requirements of the Sharia. So we cannot accuse them of simply not wanting to practice the Sharia. But then again, there is lack of research and publication in this area. So therefore, there is no reference material for people to look at as guidance. So,
Sorry for interrupting, Prof. Are you showing your slides right now? Because we can't see your slides on your screen.
Now it disappeared again. I don't know. I'm seeing.
Yes.
Okay, let me see what happened now. Can you see the slide now?
Yes, clearly. Thank you, Prof.
Oh, I'm sorry, I do not know. Things go wrong today. This,
Sorry, Prof. We can see the blank screen without your slides on.
say that again, sorry?
We can see the blank screen, but we can't see the slides.
Oh dear, what's going on? Is the slide on now?
No,
Not
not
yet, Prof.
yet. I thought that it's my phone that is wrong.
Well, I don't know. This what they call slide thingy, and the whole presentation today is really a challenge to me. Yeah. So I stopped sharing and now I'm sharing it again. Yeah.
Sure, Prof.
Just a minute. Can you see the slides now?
Yes, we can see now. Thank you.
Let me try. Is it okay now?
Yes, Prof.
That's good. Now let me go back to where my slides that I'm presenting just now. Right. Sorry, and it is unfortunate that we have the EMCO today. Otherwise, I will be at FSPU with very good trusted colleague helping me to make sure that this presentation can be done in an orderly manner. So I apologize, please bear with me. Minta maaf ya. Moving on, so I can conclude with the little information that I've shared with you today that Sharia in the built environment is there. It is being practiced, but its application is very small. It is still at its infancy, early stage, early days. It is perhaps like what happened to Islamic banking and finance about 30 years ago. So therefore, there is an urgent need to conduct studies on the subject of Sharia in the built environment. And I want to propose that we recognize Sharia in the built environment as a body of knowledge, much like Islamic banking and finance and the others. So, and we have to bring this subject matter to the mainstream so that we can look into the entire supply chain of the construction industry and the built environment, from land matters all the way to zakat, wakaf, Islamic philanthropy. There is a role to be played by all the disciplines within the built environments and beyond, because the built environment is not comprising only of architects, engineers, QS, planners, and the likes. We need bankers, yeah? We need people from the insurance industries and the lot. So therefore, we need to study the entire supply chain in relation to the built environment and see what we can do, whether the current practice are in compliance with the Sharia, and if it is not in compliance with the Sharia, what should we do? So here, it is a multidisciplinary in nature, and I list briefly the scope of study or research that we ought to do. Of course, you guys can think of many other aspects beyond what I have listed here. This is just the tip of the iceberg. And if we start looking into those subject areas, what do we expect at the end of the day? I would want to see minimum standard, for example, guidelines and best practices. We know whether the current practice comply or not in compliance. If they are not in compliance, what should we do to make them to comply with the Sharia? And whatever that we have researched, the output can be put back into curriculum development so that we can teach our undergraduate and postgraduate and also in training to make sure that people start to appreciate and understand the requirements of the Sharia in the built environment. Because unfortunately, through about 10, 12 years of my research into Sharia in the built environment, unfortunately, many people, A, don't understand what it is all about, and B, worse still, they say, what's wrong with the current system? I'm not saying the current system is wrong, but we need to see if the current systems are in compliance, we make sure we can enhance that. But if the current systems are not in compliance, what do we need to do to make it comply, or is there an alternative? So that has been my interest for the last 10, 15 years. Just to give you an idea that this is a researchable subject, yeah, because in fact, I entered into a debate with colleagues from Kyoto University about 6, 7 years ago, because to them, Sharia in the built environment initially is not a research, or it's not a researchable item, they say, because it is not scientific. But after a lengthy debate with them, they agree, and in fact, they supported our studies, and we have been doing annual Sharia and the built environment research seminars when I was in my previous university. So just to give you an idea that actually the industry support the idea about Sharia and the built environment. For instance, here in the past, while I was at my previous university, we have been and successful in getting grants to look at wakaf, minimum standard for house design for zakat and wakaf, yeah, including TRGS grant, FRGS and NAPREC grant, around about 500,000-600,000 in a matter of about 3 to 4 years. So here, why I'm putting it here, I want to prove that the industry are expecting us to do this. There are provisions for people to bid in order to start looking seriously into Sharia in the built environment. So what have we done so far based on records here? We have been looking at Sharia compliant contract terms. We're looking at bonds and insurances that meet the requirements of the Sharia. We look at Sharia compliant in the procurement processes and contract administration. In interim payment, there's a typo there, should be interim payments. Islamic principle in project management, Islamic principle in risk and takaful. We look at compliances at surah, at petrol station, just to prove a point. Whatever we are doing, is it in accordance or not in accordance with the Sharia, but to try and make it a point that we need minimum standard. We have looked at tahkim or arbitration in dispute resolution. And also we look at minimum design standard for wakaf and zakat housing, for instance. Yeah? And I'm not promoting this, but I'm just telling you that in fact, publishers are also keen on the subject of Sharia in construction and the built environment. And here we managed to publish a book internationally through WS Publication, and this book is available worldwide on Sharia for the construction industry. In fact, the publisher did mention to me that if there are further ideas to explore on this topic, they are very keen to help me to publish. This is where we launched our first book in Kyoto, Japan, and we received very good support from people there. Here are some of the ideas for research that we can think of, but here are works that has already been done. For example, like recently in Zaufi 2020, we wrote and presented collaborative framework to empower zakat and wakaf in the provision of affordable housing. Here in WCIT 2014, we talk about istisna and how to make istisna valid in the context of the current contract practice, whereby bill of quantities are being used. So that is promoting the validity of istisna for construction works using bill of quantities. Here is a PhD. The person graduated in 2014, whereby we look at insurance, in particular claim for loss and damages under insurance of works. And we discover that the current practice of claims for insurance are not in accordance with the Sharia. So in this PhD, the student designed the processes and the methodology in order to make it sure that when people claim for insurance for construction works are in accordance with the Sharia. That's in 2014. This is a recent PhD, 2019, whereby Dr. Rashid looked at Islamic leadership principle and how leadership principle can be applied in project management. Currently ongoing at IIUM, I was initially the supervisor, but I left the university. But here we talk about with, i.e. how to deal with delayed interim payments in construction contract. So the candidate is working on PhD with others at IIUM. So with that very brief ideas and with a lot of chaos, especially because of technical issues, and I apologize, yeah, I can conclude as way forward. So Sharia compliant in the built environment is there, and it is a credible alternative to the currently conventional system. However, many in the construction industry, in the built environment, academia and non-academics are still unaware and lack understanding, hence the limited practice that we are having now. Therefore, capacity building is required, i.e. training is required. Sharia compliant in the built environment is a huge subject. What I'm saying here is not even a percent. Yeah? It is still at its infancy. Therefore, it is a huge agenda for research. There are opportunities for everyone. However, it depends on the interest and the keenness of the key players, policy makers, experts, researchers, and students, whether they are keen to look into the subject matter or not. But as Muslim, I believe it is our duty to promote and practice the Sharia, and here in the context of our built environment, what we ought to do. Yeah? Are we not concerned, therefore, as Muslim, I ask? And to me, it is also as an act of da'wah. So that is all my main presentation. I thank you for listening. I apologize for the technical issues earlier on. I did all the yesterday we did simple testing. It well. We thought initially we planned to have it done at the office so that there are people helping me. But because of the MCO, I have to work at home. I don't mind doing it, but unfortunately, there have been some issues earlier on. But anyway, again, my apologies. So, is there any question? Or I pass it. Minta maaf. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Prof, for your very insightful, informative, and inspiring sharing just now. So it is now time to open for Q&A session. If you have any queries to ask to our speaker, feel free to ask directly, or you may need to write it on the chat box. So any questions from the participants? Any questions?
Assalamualaikum Prof. Dr. Akmal, ni apa ni Jamal dekan FSPU. So I think
Yes, Prof.
congratulations together with you. My question is that Prof, I was thinking that first I like the presentation to be put in our website so other people who are unable to join today will be able to get more from this. And second is I'm thinking like maybe yes, in addition to research is you mentioned just now a lot of people out there in the construction industry maybe they are unaware of this. Then perhaps we can do training for the people in the built environment. So we can do it together with Achis, maybe short courses and things like that. So what do you think about that, Prof?
Inshallah, Prof. We are putting together the resources available within us, and yes, there is a viable option that we can look at training, but we need to train ourselves first, Prof. Inshallah.
Okay, thank you.
Tak ada yang ni apa? Dr. Khairuddin mati pun tak
Any other questions from the participants?
Please.
Let me check the chat box if we have any questions.
I have a question. Beside means Okay, there is one question here. This management in Sharia Compliance could benefit the business environment.
Kata Didi, tak ada dalam ni. Lepas tu saya tanya Dr. Rosie, kenapa?
Please, other participants, please unmute your speaker, please.
Dia surat.
Right. So there is a question here. It says, beside mainly in construction management, in what other areas would Sharia compliant could also benefit in the built environment? Well, in my presentation, I did propose that the entire supply chain of construction and the built environment require us to look at, not just in construction management, in design. For example, I share you a story that happened to me many years ago. While I was in my previous university, I would normally have 2 or 3 visits at time to Japan because we have a summer school at Kyoto University, and also I have lectures at Toyo University in Tokyo. So in one of the visit that is prior to the Japanese government hosting Tokyo Olympic, which is now put on hold, a professor at Toyo University who is a friend to the mayor of Tokyo asked me because the mayor asked him. So the question is very simple. So the mayor asked Prof. Tabuchi and he asked me, is there a proper standard for us to build Muslim prayers room in order to make sure that Muslim attending the Olympic in Tokyo will not be deprived of proper praying places? So that was the question. I can't answer him simply because when I get back, I check and I ask people, they know what is required or what are the requirements to build a surau, for example, but there is no standard. So that brings us to this idea, we need minimum standards. The Japanese, when they want to build certain things, they have very specific size, dimension, orientation, design, the lot, and that is what they expect. I'm sure there are some form of guidance somewhere, but we need to put them together into a proper standards. So that are the duties of the designers. So it is therefore not just construction management. So we need to sit down, and that's why I said in my earlier presentation that this is to be tackled from a multidisciplinary kind of approach. For example, while I was in my previous university, I worked with architects, landscape architects, looking at minimum design standard for low-cost housing to be constructed by Wakaf and Zakat, because there is no such standards. They simply adopt whatever the current low-cost housing that is available in the market. But then there are specific requirements that we need to adhere to, because we are looking at houses that are being funded by Zakat and Wakaf. As I said earlier on, if we can't deal with the entire construction output, at least we ought to be paying particular attention to those output that are being funded through Islamic means, Zakat and Wakaf, for example. Yeah. So the the concept and also the scope of Sharia compliance is not just in construction management. Here today, I show much of it because I am looking into it from the perspective of procurement. But wait, for example, in a few weeks' time when Dato' Asia present, she can come up with ideas on minimum standard for design of housing, for example. Yeah, so it is beyond construction management. Yeah. Now I have another question, Dr. Noor Akama. It says here, I can't see the CIDB involvement in Sharia compliance at the moment. Well, I'm afraid I can't comment on what CIDB is doing or not doing, but on visual observation, yeah, they are not involved so far. We did try to talk to CIDB, we did try to talk to JKR, but so far it is still an ongoing process. Yeah, it is still an ongoing process. So great, giving me ideas in design and in landscape architecture. I think if this person is from landscape architecture, then perhaps you can talk to some of the landscape architects at IIUM. They are quite active in looking at Islamic-based design in landscape architecture and the like. Sorry, I must admit that today's presentation is not very good because of the earlier hiccup. I'm sorry, I myself also were chaotic in my presentation, so I apologize, but I hope participants get the gist, i.e. the needs and the importance of Sharia compliance in the built environment, and it should be applied to the entire supply chain from the point where we want to initiate the project all the way until to the end user. So it is there, scope for everybody. And if we are not concerned for the entire construction output, let us start by thinking, what about that more or less 6 billion Islamic related facilities? And in one of my research papers, a few years back, I have this idea to convert zakat and wakaf and Islamic philanthropy as the third funding force for Muslim in the context of sustainability. And in fact, when we look at Sharia compliance, we're also talking about sustainability, green construction, and stuff like that.
Thank you, Prof. Assalamualaikum. Any more questions? Assalamualaikum. Waalaikumsalam. Okay, my name is Siti Nadia binti Muhammad Adi. I am from UiTM era.
Yeah.
Okay, Prof, actually we have met together before this at UPM. It was 2 years ago.
Okay.
Okay, if you heard my name Siti Nadia, I was put many papers because we are doing the same research. My research is focused on integration of wakaf and zakat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sir, Prof, can I ask you a few questions because I'm doing my PhD now, focusing on these matters. Can you give me some opinion and ideas for me to present the future research for this wakaf and zakat integration? Because you use the term of collaboration and my term is integration. What is the differences between collaboration and integration from the wakaf and real estate perspective? Can I get your opinion, Prof?
Right. I have published a paper in 2014 whereby I proposed that zakat and wakaf should work together. Yep, that's one. And in 2016 or 17, I think it was, we completed a research funded by NAPRED Ministry of Finance. And in that research, we proposed the integration of zakat and wakaf, and we even proposed the model of working together. Yeah. So what happened based on our study here, expert, please help me if I'm saying things that is not correct. Yeah. So based on our study, due to certain limitations, so zakat and wakaf are often working on their own. Yeah, so wakaf doing their bit, zakat doing their bit. Of course, there are background to it. For instance, like zakat, it is meant for the asnaf, so you cannot spend it on others. Wakaf, it depends on the niyah of the wakaf, you see. So what we did then, we proposed and we identified the injunction that ought to be revised to enable these two, zakat and wakaf, to work together. For example, in our model, we say that we can develop the unused wakaf land and turn it into housing for the needy, for example, and zakat can buy those units for the asnaf. So that is one model, because what happened, wakaf in this country is often related to Islamic related development only, surau, graveyard. Only lately people are talking about wakaf in the context of training, hotel and stuff like that, but it's still a long way to go. So we say if wakaf have got land, plenty of it, but they have no money to develop, why can't then they work with zakat? Because we know zakat have a lot of money. So zakat fund project on wakaf land, so that at the end of the day, that project can benefit the asnaf if it is funded by Zakat Fund, for example. But we also study and we observe that both Zakat and Wakaf are not really competent in looking at property development. So we then propose that they work with private property developer. So that model of working together or collaboration, we have presented in 2014 in WCIT in Ipoh, and also is the what you call final report of a research that we have done funded by NAPREC. So if you can contact me, we can look into that in some detail.
Okay, Prof. Thank you, Prof. You give me an opportunity to know more about this research. Thank you, Prof. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your question. Okay, we have one more question in the chat box, Prof.
Right.
A student from UiTM Shah. The question is on how serious is the university in applying and implementing Sharia compliance in the degree syllabus for the start? What should students do to look forward for it?
Right. So this it should be directed to the top management of the university. I don't think I have the authority to say beyond. If I am going to share my personal view, yeah, we can through research put together a curriculum that can be taught at undergraduate. For example, at IIUM, we develop a specific course, Islamic procurement, for the undergraduate, so that at the end, when they graduate, they appreciate what is Sharia compliant for construction and the built environment. So now it is a subject being taught at undergraduate at IIUM. Moving on, I think the university top management can look into having it as a subject, perhaps initially as an elective, yeah? But eventually perhaps it can be converted into a postgraduate program, a diploma, for instance, and after we have enough expertise, perhaps then we can offer it as an undergraduate program. But that one, I'm very supportive of this idea. In fact, in SIBE, that is one of our objectives, to persuade university to bring the Sharia compliant as a course in training at undergraduate level. But honestly, this kind of question require input from the top management. Perhaps Prof. Jamal is here. Prof. Jamal, do you want to comment on this? I think Prof. Jamal should be the right person because he is the Dean of FSPU. Or perhaps we can take this up.
Okay, Prof. Yes, I think we look into that one. As a start, maybe later we're going to propose to have this one here for, we're going to embed in the existing curriculum. So that one is much easier. And later on, perhaps we can start together with Achis, because Achis now is very active in trying to do the cross-disciplinary courses. So we'll discuss with Achis, so at least we can start one, maybe postgraduate in Sharia in the built environment. Okay. So as a start, we look into embedding it into existing curriculum. Perhaps in 2 or 3 years' time, then we can have a new program together with Achis on this. Okay, thank you, Prof.
Right. Thank you, Prof. Jamal. So there, fifth Adham, the answer from the Dean himself. I'm very supportive of this idea, yes.
Because
Any more questions?
this is also a new program you are looking at into the future, because we are supposed to be creating new programs, and this is one program we're going looking at seriously. And like Prof. Khairuddin mentioned, that we need to develop our expertise. The capacity building is first. Then, after that, we get into the new program. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Prof. Jamal. Yeah. Any other issues?
Any more questions from the participants?
But anyway, you guys look at FSPU, you can always come and see me. We can talk on this subject. But yes, somebody asking question? Please.
Any more questions from the participants? Prof, me
Yes.
myself have a very quick question here. It's about how could we integrate between the new technologies that everybody is chasing right now. For example, the building information modeling, AR technologies, and so on. So, what do you think about how do we collaborate between these two research or integrate between the technologies, and also the Sharia compliances in the construction industry? What do you reckon, Prof? Thank you.
Right, thank you for the question. In fact, a few weeks back, somebody from construction management, FSPU, did talk to me on this subject of FM as well as BIM. How can we look at it from the perspective of the Sharia? As what I'm trying to say at the beginning of my presentation, Sharia is Islam is ad-din, and Sharia is our guiding principle. And we cannot separate ad-din because it is our way of life. So if BIM 4.0, FM, or whatever that you want to do, there are areas that we can synchronize so that it can be done in a Sharia compliance manner. For example, I start with FM. I ask this simple question: how do you procure services? Are we doing services procurement for FM in the conventional way? If we are doing in the conventional way, we need to look at the terms. Are those terms meeting the requirement of the Sharia or not? So that is to begin with. That's just a simple analogy there. Moving on, we talk about BIM. BIM is information. Yeah. So before that, we have 2D, we have 3Ds. Then we move on into 4, 5Ds, and now people talk about building information modeling. So we talk about ownership. We talk about sharing. Who is responsible? At this in the context of the Sharia, ownership of the information. How do we share those information, for instance? How can we deal with accuracy or inaccuracy of those information? And we can get those information if we study the Sharia properly. So I don't see it to be distinct. I don't see it to be not relevant. But to me, Sharia is central in whatever that we're dealing. Like earlier on, we talk about design, for example. Many people in the design think that Sharia is good for construction management, but that's not the case. Try thinking about designing of our current house, for instance. What are the Sharia requirements in relation to privacy? Our interaction with neighbors, for example. There's in the Sharia that we need to do. How do we deal with common or joint properties, for example? And I hope this can be touched by Dr. Dani in 2 weeks' time because he is an expert in this area.
Okay, thank you, Prof, for the answers. Any more questions? I think it seems like we have attended all questions, inshallah. We have one more question here from Amirul Hakim, as students. Should the development of Sharia compliance imperative only be beneficial to a few, or should society at large be the focus?
Right. Please think about Islamic banking and finance. So Islamic banking and finance only benefiting the Muslims or it benefits all? So in my book, the latest publication 2019, we are saying that Sharia compliant offer an alternative to the current problem in conventional practice. And based on what we have done so far, including contribution by non-Muslims in our publication, so it suggests that it is applicable for all. Some of the ideas in Sharia, people say it is universal, but this is Sharia. So therefore, because it is universal to some, so it is applicable to all. So my answer is Sharia is not for the select few, it is meant for all. And if we want to argue, just look at Islamic banking and finance. And in fact, Islamic banking and finance, in certain banks, I was told the number of non-Muslim putting their money there or using the facilities are more than Muslim, in fact. at least in terms of the amount. Yes, so it is applicable for all.
Okay, thank you, Prof. I think we are running out of time. So it looks like we have attended to all questions, inshallah. So is there anything else from the participants? Or maybe last words from Prof, our speaker?
Right, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Noor Akmal. What I can say, first of all, saya minta maaf, the technical hiccup tadi, yeah. So if there is a need for anyone to talk about this Sharia compliance, you can come and see me at FSPU, or you can write me email. Me and my colleague will attend to it. In terms of opportunity for research, as I said earlier on, it applies to the entire supply chain from starting on land matters all the way to the end users. So there are so many things that we need to do. There are so many areas that we need to put things together. It is like a jigsaw puzzle at the moment, because some of the works that I've done so far are patchy here and there. We look at wakaf, we look at zakat, we look at contract terms, we look at procurement, you know. So the end product I'm hoping is that this can be put together like we are doing a jigsaw puzzle, you know. And it is my idea that at the end of the day, we can integrate designers, contractors, and quantity surveyors, building management people to put together and come up with a proper guidance, minimum practice standard, for example, to comply with the Sharia for the construction industry and the built environment. That's what I hope to be the end game for now. Wallahu a'lam. Thank you, Dr.
Yes, great. Thank you, Prof. Despite of having technical glitches here and there just now, but you managed to finish your slides eventually, and you have answered all those questions. With that, we will end this session shortly. Make sure you have your attendance recorded by clicking the link available in the chat box. So thank you for participating today, and thank you for visiting this webinar series. Thank you, Prof. Thank you again, Prof. And thank you to all participants. So stay safe, stay healthy, and goodbye. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Dr. Kana. Thank you, everyone.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.